Hi guys, hope you're all doing well, and in this video I'm going to talk about role-based access control. This video will be a longer video comparatively to what I've been posting before, but I can assure you that once you will finish this video and after watching this video, you will have a fair understanding of what role-based access control is. I'm also going to talk about default RBAC roles which are available in Azure AD and Office 365. I would like to give an architectural overview of these roles as well, that why the list that you see in Azure AD is different from what you see in Office 365. Then I will be covering RBAC for Azure Portal, which is portal.azure.com. One very common term that you guys might have read while going through any of the articles that portal.azure.com is a ARM portal. So ARM over there stands for Azure Resource Manager. I'll try to give you overview about what is a resource and how resource provider is registered while you create any sort of resource like VM or database. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about custom RBAC role. Now, creating custom RBAC role does require a PowerShell module, which I will be guiding how you can install. If you have already installed, just go through and create custom RBAC roles. Now, one more thing that I would like to address here, that once you finish this video, go ahead and try creating your own custom roles. If you come across any issues, let's use this comment section to discuss them, and I would be happy to help you. Now, before we move on with core concepts of RBAC, let's just get an architectural view because that will, if we cover that, we will have a better understanding of RBAC. Now, we know that Office 365 is actually a bundle of service, likewise, OneDrive, SharePoint Online, and Exchange. And Office 365 is something, or you can think of Office 365 as an application that relies on Azure Active Directory. Now, one more very common scenario, and that is that we have seen this in large enterprises that the people who know how Exchange work, they might don't know how SharePoint works. So what we do is we give them special roles, likewise Exchange administrator or SharePoint administrator. Now I'm talking about these two roles because they are by default available with Office 365. I will be showcasing all this on the portal as well, but I would like to give you a brief overview about how Office 365 roles and Azure AD roles are similar and different with each other. Okay, so we have default roles likewise SharePoint administrator and Exchange administrator, but the underlying concept here is just to prevent unauthorized access. So likewise, if there is a person who knows how Exchange work and he doesn't know how SharePoint works, so as per the skill set of that particular employee or that particular administrator, giving him the privilege to manage SharePoint would not make any sense. This is exactly what role-based access control is. That means preventing unauthorized access to a resource which is not even required as per the skill set of a particular employee. So as the name itself defines its meaning, role-based access control, depending upon the role of a particular user, you're defining some permission so that he or she should not get access to a resource which he or she is actually not managing. Now, as I said before, that Office 365 under the hood uses Azure Active Directory for identity management. Now, what do I mean by this? That when you go to portal.azure.com or when you go to portal.office.com as well, or you create a user, it's actually the Azure Active Directory where the accounts or identities are getting same. Now, when you sync the identities from on-prem to Azure AD, still it's the Azure Active Directory itself which is hosting the identity part. So you can think of this like Office 365 is something that is using a space or that is sharing a service with Azure Active Directory, and that will be identity management. So user account, groups, and these kind of identities, they already exist in Azure Active Directory, and it's Office 365 which is using the identities which are already existing in Azure Active Directory. But Azure Active Directory has a lot more capabilities apart from just maintaining identities. Likewise, you have conditional access, you can add different applications. And likewise, Office 365, you have Intune as well that use Azure Active Directory for the identity management. Now, why I'm explaining all this? Because there is a difference. So think about this now as a scenario wherein Office 365 is an application that is using the identity part of Azure Active Directory. So that means what? All the roles that will be available in Office 365 will be listed in Azure Active Directory. But there are some capabilities which are available in Azure Active Directory that are not available in Office 365. That means when you go to portal.azure.com, you can invite guest users. Okay, you can add applications in your Azure Active Directory. These things are not available in Office 365 because Office 365 itself is an application which is relying on Azure Active Directory to get the identity part complete. Now, I'm telling all this because I would like to conclude a statement here, and that is all the roles that you see in Office 365 will be available in Azure Active Directory, but there will be a couple of roles which will be available in Azure Active Directory, but they will not be available in portal.office.com. Now I'll switch to my portal to explain it in a much better way. So I'll go to my admin center and I will check for any of the user, and then we'll go for checking the roles which are available. So let's say I've selected this role, this user whose name is enter, for example. And if I click on role, as you can see that right now this is a user with no admin access. And what I'm getting here is global admin. That means either I can make him a global admin or I can also choose a customized administrator. Now what you see here is different kind of roles available for different kind of service which Office 365 offers. Likewise, Skype for Business Administrator, likewise, SharePoint Administrator, Exchange Administrator, User Management Administrator. So these are the roles which you can choose from portal.office.com. That means the application itself is giving you the privilege to choose what role a user should belong to. And this is something which is directly related to Azure Active Directory. Now, if I go to portal.azure.com and if I click on Azure Active Directory, and then I will be clicking on roles section, this one. And what you will observe that all the roles that you see here will be available on this particular portal as well, on this particular section as well. And the account with which you will logged in, it will show you your role if you have any specific. Now, as I said before, that in Azure Active Directory, it's not only Office 365. You can add application as well. So if you go to portal, you see application administrator, which is not available in Office 365. You also see guest inviter role, which is not available in Office 365. And as I said before, likewise, Office 365 Intune is also using Azure Active Directory under the hood. So you also see Intune Administrator. So this is exactly the different kind of roles that are available with Office 365 and Azure Active Directory. Now, one simple takeaway from here, and that is that all the roles which will be existing in Office 365 will be available in Azure Active Directory, but there will be some other roles apart from Office 365 which will be available in Azure AD portal, because it's not only Office 365, there are different other applications or services which are using Azure Active Directory to get their identity part completed. Now, this was all about Azure Active Directory and Office 365. Because with Office 365 and Azure Active Directory, you don't have the privilege at this particular moment to create your own custom role. So what you can do is, depending upon the job role of your employee, what you can do is you can assign a specific role, but you won't be able to add a custom role here that can do some sort of activities, or you can block some activities. Likewise, we do for actual Azure portal, which is the ARM portal, the same portal, but over there we will be talking about resources. So when it comes to user identities, either managing from Office 365 or Azure AD, these are the two portals which you can refer and assign a specific role to a particular user so that he can use or do the tasks that you have aligned, and it should also prevent unauthorized access. Now, let's talk about the RBAC for Azure portal, which is ARM portal. Now, for that, I would like to discuss the same scenario but in a different way. Let's say we have a specific set of users who will be managing VMs, and we also have a specific set of users that will be managing database, and the same goes for virtual network. Now, think about this, like if a person knows how to manage VM, will it make any sense to give him the privilege to use database and virtual network? It's not about questioning the skill set of an employee, it's about giving unauthorized access. So likewise, a guy who knows how VM work, he might not be able to operate virtual network in much more efficient way. So what we can do is, with the help of RBAC, we can actually constrain the access for a particular employee to just prevent unauthorized access. Okay, that's the agenda. So role-based access control conceptually is nothing different for Azure AD, Office 365, or Azure Portal. The concept is same. Depending upon the job role of a particular employee, I'm giving him the privilege which he or she should access so that the unauthorized access can be controlled. But the way RBAC works for Azure Portal is slightly different to what we have seen in Azure AD and Office 365. Now, what do I mean by this? For that, let's talk about how exactly Azure Portal works. So if we talk about Azure Portal, the very first thing that you see the moment you log in, and that is subscription. Now, subscription is something which you can think of like a billing account. Let's say you have deployed 5 VMs, so how much money you have to pay to Azure, or how much money you have to pay to Microsoft. That is something which is being done with the help of subscription. That's why you have different types of subscription, which you can opt or which you can choose as per your requirement. Now, the moment you log into portal.azure.com, the first window that you see, the home page itself, that means this is your Azure subscription. Now, obviously, what you can do is you can verify by clicking on subscription. If you will not have any subscription, you won't be able to deploy any resource, likewise creating a VM, load balancer, or anything. So if you will not have a subscription, this portal will itself prompt you to get one. The moment you have a subscription or you have subscribed, what you can do is you can click on subscription and just check more details about your subscription, likewise what kind of subscription it is, what you have chosen, what is the location, and a couple of other things which can be checked. Now, in order to move forward, that means in order to deploy any resource, what you need is a resource group. So inside a subscription, there will be multiple resource groups. Now, why I'm saying all this, because let's say I go and deploy a virtual machine. Now, the moment I will click on add, it will ask me to give some of the details. Likewise, subscription, you can select your subscription if you have multiple, and then there is an option of resource group. So self-service portal is something which is by default created, or which I have created before. But if, let's say, there is no resource group currently existing on your subscription, you have to create a new. Now, what do I mean by this? That keeping things more organized will help you as an administrator or as a guy who will be managing the entire infrastructure, that you can keep things more organized and you can keep things inside a group so that it will help you to easily identify which resource group you have to refer to, or it will also help you to create your own custom rules that will have a better scope as compared to directly creating them on a subscription. Now, if we go back to our deck, what we discussed that Azure Portal, the first node will be subscription, and then inside your subscription, you have resource groups. Now, whenever you deploy any resource, that will get saved in any of these resource group. That means what? Each resource group can have virtual machine, database, or virtual network, but all the resources that you have kept in these resource group, they will be separated from each other. Now, talking about RBAC, there are two type of roles which exist in terms of RBAC for Azure Portal, and the first one will be of default roles. Now, what do I mean by default roles? That let's say owner, contributor, reader. So when we go to portal.azure.com and just click on your subscription, let's start from subscription itself. Now, the moment you will click on subscription, make sure that you get an option of this one. You will get by default. I'm saying this because this is the option which will actually help you to implement role-based access control. So IAM here stands for Identity and Access Management. Now, the moment you will click on this option, you will get a list of roles. Now, since this is a subscription, the very first node of RBAC, you will get a bunch of lists, many roles will get listed here. But there is one more thing that I would like to cover, and that is this list that we see here is the default roles available. You can create your custom as well, but right now the list that we can see is the default roles. Now, roles are also resource specific. Now, what do I mean by this? That if I go to role-based access control or custom roles that are available for let's say for a VM, we will see a different list. So likewise, if I go to my VM, which is a kind of resource that I have created, if I go to my VM and if I click on roles, then the list that I will be getting will be different to what we get while we query subscription. You see the difference. So a virtual machine contributor cannot manage a database. This is very obvious that a virtual machine contributor cannot manage a database. That's why the default roles are resource specific. So when you query a subscription to get a default list, obviously a subscription can hold anything: database, VM, virtual network, anything that you deploy comes under a subscription. That's why you see this big list when you go ahead and check for roles that are available on your subscription. But when you go at a resource specific or at the resource level, this list will keep on getting changed. Now, coming back to our deck where we were discussing about default roles. So any role that has been given at the subscription level will be inherited to resource group as well as your resources. So a subscription owner will have the owner privilege on your resource group as well as the resource. Now, what do I mean by this? That default role once assigned at a level, the level to which you have assigned that particular role, it will be inherited by rest of the levels below that part. So likewise, if I'm giving a owner permission to a subscription level, it will be available in resource group. It will be available in resources as well. The same goes for contributor and the same goes for reader as well. So make sure that when you assign a role, you must be choosing a specific node. Likewise, if you want a user to have access to a particular resource group, only assign a respective role at that particular resource group. Don't assign a role at the subscription level itself, because what will happen in this case, that since you have assigned a role to a particular user at a subscription level, that role will be inherited and user might get unauthorized access. Let's talk about more uh, in terms of how default role works, and then it'll be better. Then you guys will have a better understanding what I'm trying to explain. So the first node, as discussed before, is a subscription, and then you have resource group. But now let's assume in this resource group, you have three different resources, likewise virtual machine, database, and virtual network. Now, since this is a resource group, everything will be closed. Now, at the subscription, what I have seen is there are three roles getting listed, likewise owner, contributor, and reader. So the moment you will assign any user a owner, contributor, or reader, whatever role you select, that will be inherited to resource group as well as resources. This is something which will happen with custom roles as well. What we are discussing right now is inheritance. You have to be very specific when you are choosing the node, or if we talk about the exact term which we will be discussing in a custom role, it is called assignable scope. So make sure that when you are scoping a particular role, it should be scoped to the exact resource group or the exact subscription. Now let's talk about custom roles, how custom roles work. So the very first thing that you have again is subscription, and you have two different resource groups. Now the first resource group consists of virtual machine and database, and the other resource group will consist virtual networks. Now, now what is the requirement? That is, the first resource group should have a role wherein a user should only be able to manage a virtual machine or a database, and the second resource group should only be able to manage virtual network. So what we can do is we have two options now. The very first one is we can define custom roles at the subscription level, or we can also define custom roles at both the resource group level. Now, in order to achieve this, the very first resource group requires access to a virtual machine. So let's say I've created a role and named it as custom virtual machine. Now, this role will not be available on the other side. That means the second resource group, because I have scoped this role to be available on this particular resource group. In the similar way, what we can do is we can create another role named as custom virtual network. This will be available at this particular resource group and will not be available on the first resource group because we have scoped it to the second resource group. So this is the logical understanding of how role inheritance work in Azure portal, and how a role defined at the subscription level will be available at the resource group level and resources, but how a role which is defined at one particular resource group will not be available to other resource groups. Now, there is one more very important concept that I would like to cover, and that is resource and resource provider. But I would like to request you guys that if I'm saying something that is not making sense, please pause the video, watch it again, just get to the roots of what I'm trying to explain. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment and we'll discuss this, because every deck that I'm covering is related to another one. So if you will miss something, you might not be able to understand what exactly I'm trying to convey and how I'm trying to explain things in much more logical way. Okay, so what is a resource and resource provider? From an admin perspective, I use Azure.com, portal.azure.com to deploy a particular component, likewise virtual machine or let's say database. But from service perspective, from portal.azure.com cloud service perspective, everything is a resource. So a VM is also a resource. A database is also a resource. Now the question comes, what is this resource provider? So you can think of this like a VM. The moment you click on create VM, there are n number of processes that are happening under the hood. Likewise, aligning a particular storage, getting the operating system ready, aligning a virtual NIC, making the internet connectivity available on that particular VM. So all these things, all these different components are actually being provided by different resource provider. So even if you create a VM, it's a resource that is going to use different components, and all these components are actually being provided to you by a resource provider. Now, this is something which you're not going to troubleshoot or you're not going to actively work with, but it's better that we should have an understanding of what resource provider is, because this will help you a lot when you will go ahead and customize RBAC role or create your own roles. Now, in order to get the list of all the resource providers, what you can do is you can type a command on PowerShell, which I will be showing you. But before we move on and understand how things work, I will also be showcasing you how you can install a particular module which is required to do all this. So the very first command that you have to type would be install hyphen module and then Azure RM. This command is going to check if this module is already installed or not. If it is already installed, you can just import it. If it is not, then you can install it from here itself. In my machine, it is already installed. You guys do try this command and install it. So I'll click on A even though it is already installed, and that's what I'm getting right now. Now, since it is installed and it is already imported, but you guys who will be installing this for the first time, just run this command once again, which is import dot hyphen module Azure RM, and then it will be imported. Now what I'll do is I will connect with my global admin account. So this is the first command that you have to type, and that will be connect hyphen Azure RM account. Now I will type my credentials, and then we will be checking a list of all the resource providers. So in order to get the list of resource provider, what you have to do is you have to type get hyphen Azure RM resource provider. That's it. Now, I might not get a full list because I have deployed only one VM. So in most of the cases, what it will show you is only those resource provider which are registered with your subscription. So if a particular resource provider is not registered, it will not get reflected here. So as you can see that there is a resource provider called, let's say, Microsoft.compute providers namespace, and the kind of features or the kind of offerings which it gives is availability sets, virtual machines, virtual machine extensions, and virtual machine scale sets. So this is just for your information. You're not going to troubleshoot this. As I said before, all you need to do is you have to just get the understanding of why this is important. Because when we will be reading a custom template that is available on Microsoft website itself, over there you will see these terms. So I want you to understand that when you are reading the action part of a custom RBAC role, you should know what exactly it is. So now moving on with the next deck, and that will be the steps to create a custom RBAC role. So installation of Azure RM module I've already covered. Import Azure RM module, you can use the command import hyphen module Azure RM and it will be imported. Third thing which is very important for you to understand, and that was how to use the template which are already available and how you should define actions, not actions, and assignable scope. For this, let me switch to my browser and let's discuss the custom role and how it works. So for that, what I'll do is I will simply type RBAC for Azure. In fact, custom RBAC for Azure. Now the very first link will itself show you the module or the template that you have to use in order to create roles. And once you have this available, then you can open a notepad and just copy this. So this is the list of or you can say the values which are there in the template, which we are going to customize. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you know every line and what exactly it means. So the first one is saying a virtual machine operator. That means you can customize this and I can name it as, let's say, custom ConceptsWork, for example. Now, every role has an ID. So if you will check the default roles which are available, you will get an ID. Now, ID is, you can think of as like object ID. Object ID might be a wrong word, but it's just a value which is specific to each and every role. Now, if I go to PowerShell and if I do, let's say, if I query if I query all the roles which are by default available, and for that I have to do get hyphen Azure RM role definition. So this will list all the roles which are by default available. So as you can see, it's a big list, and this will also give you the information about what all a particular role has privilege or what all a particular role user can do and what all different components can be accessed by a particular role. So this is the list of the roles that are available at the subscription level. That means all the default roles which are available. Whenever you have time, you can go through with this and you can read what exactly different kind of parameters mentioned here. But for our demo, what I'll do is I'll choose one role and we'll read everything that's mentioned here. So the first one says name, which is very common, ID. Now this ID is a specific for this particular role. A primary key value is custom is false because it is a default role. Description, you can define anything. Now, the very important part comes, and that is actions. Now, this is something which is directly related to resource provider, which I was discussing before. So if you guys have doubt about resource provider, please rewind, watch that part once again, and then come back here because this will give you a great understanding. Now, as you can see, what I'm getting right now is Microsoft dot authorization. Now, what exactly this Microsoft authorization is? It's actually a resource provider because it's providing a service which will be accessed and customized. So as you can see that now if I scroll up, I'll find that getting listed here, which is Microsoft dot authorization. See, this is a resource provider, and what it is showing is the registration state as registered. That means since this is available by default because it is something with which you get the access to subscription as well, but just for your information, the list that you see here will always be of registered resource provider. You might find something listed here that will not be available here. Don't worry for that. What you can do is you can just type this command, which is get hyphen Azure RM resource provider hyphen list available. So once this command is completed, you can also see those resource provider which are not registered in your particular subscription. So let's come back now to our template. So we covered name, we covered ID. Now, ID is something which is not even required because you don't know that when a role will be created, what will be the system generated value. So what you can do is you can simply remove this field. Is custom set to true? If you want, you can keep it, but this is again something which is not required. You can remove this as well. In the description section, we can type demo of RBAC. You can type anything just for your reference. Now you see actions over here, and the first one says Microsoft.storage. This star means all the next level nodes that are coming in storage has a read permission. So that means what? That Microsoft Storage will be a resource provider, and all the actions that can be done on Microsoft Storage, this role is going to have a read permission. The same goes for Microsoft.network, Microsoft.compute, Microsoft.compute virtual machine start action. So now think about this, like this line says that for compute you have read privilege, but the next one says inside the compute there will be a segment called virtual machines which you can start or restart. Microsoft authorization would allow you to read Microsoft.resource insights and Microsoft support. This is something which helps you to make the option of support available. So likewise, if I go to here, this is something which will be available. Support and troubleshooting. So Microsoft.support is something which is hosting this part on Azure portal. So as I said before, that once you try to read more and more, create custom roles more and more, you will be able to know what are the different resource provider and how things are working under the hood. So now if you go back to our notepad, you see there is nothing mentioned over here in actions. Now the question comes, how do we go ahead and check what should I mention in not actions or what should I mention in actions? Now for that, let's go to the portal and let's go to our subscription, and then we'll go and check roles. Now why I'm doing this, because the owner role will give you the list of all the resource provider, whether it is registered or not, in fact all the permissions as well. So likewise, let's say I want a role which should be able to access something like in classic compute. Let's take an example of classic compute itself. I want the user to view, let's say, only availability set. So I can click on this and then I will copy this action. And I'm going to paste this in the custom template that we have copied. And then see, one more action is added. So I'm actually telling you how you can find the list of actions, or how you can define uh, those things which a user should not be able to do. So let's say I want the user not to view the support function, okay, or the support part. So for that, what I'll do is I'll remove that from actions and I'll keep it in not actions. So this is something which will not be allowed for a particular user. Now coming to our next option, and that is data actions and non-data actions. These two values are specifically related to blob and storage accounts. So I'll be sharing a section in the description. You guys can review that, and if you still have any questions, please feel free to reach me. The last part that we see here, and that is assignable scope. Just for your information, even if I remove this, so let's say I'm creating a role for VM or something like that, this part is not even required. So if you want, you can remove that as well. Now, if I go back to assignable scope, now this is very important because this is something wherein you are going to define the node where this particular role will be available. So let's say I have a resource group, and that is self-service portal, and what I want is this role that I'm creating right now, which is named as custom underscore ConceptsWork, that should be listed here at the resource group level, but not at the subscription level. because I am defining a scope of this particular resource group. So what I'll do is I'll go in the properties section of this particular resource group, and from here I'm going to copy this resource ID. Now I'm telling you this because if you will choose this in this assignable scope, your roles will be more, I should say, efficient and will be available on a specific node itself. So assignable scope that you see in the custom RBAC role is actually this value. And what you can do is you can simply replace this with the current values that we see here and just attach two more semicolons, and that's it. So this is what a custom RBAC role is. Required fields are name, description, actions, not actions, assignable scope. Assignable scope is again the resource ID of any resource group or resource, or in fact a subscription as well. So now we have created our custom RBAC role, and what we'll do is we will save this. And in order to save this file, make sure that you always choose your file name .json, because this is something which uses JavaScript object notation. It's a kind of template that we are actually following. And that's it. Once it is saved, what we'll do is we'll go to our PowerShell, and then we are going to type new hyphen Azure RM role definition, and then input file. You can just name your file, which was rbac.json. That's it. Once this command gets completed, that means a custom RBAC role will be created in your subscription, and that will be listed where at the resource group level. So as you can see itself, I'm getting the option now of assignable scope that is actually listing the self-service portal resource group. Also, what you can see is these two fields which we have not defined, they were auto-generated. Now what I'll do is I'll go to my portal, I'll sign out, and I will sign in again, and let's see if I'm getting the option of the custom RBAC role created here or not. So now I'm logged in again to my subscription, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to my resource group, and then I will check in the roles section whether I'm getting my role listed here or not. So the name of my role was custom underscore concepts work, and let's navigate down to check if we are getting this option or not. And as you can see that I'm getting the option of custom underscore concepts work. Now whatever we defined here, that means in this RBAC role, these resource provider and all the respective permissions, what you can do is you can click on this, and now when you will click on permission, what you will see is the list of resource provider that you have used to give a specific privilege. So this was all about creating custom RBAC role. Let's have a quick overview of the role once again. Name is required, description is required, and actions and not actions you can just go ahead and run through with the portal, try different combinations to achieve a particular role, whatever you want. So one thing I would like to address here, that knowing a specific endpoint is something which is really important. If you have not added a valid action for a specific endpoint that will be hosted by a resource provider, then your role might not work. Assignable scope, again, it's the most important part because this is something which is actually going to decide where your role has to be listed on the portal. So coming back to our deck, you can import your role at different levels like subscription and resource group wherever you want, and then you can assign those roles to different users, and that's it. So in this video, we have actually covered a lot of content. We have discussed about role-based access control. We have discussed about how RBAC is available in Azure AD Office 365, as well as Azure RM Portal. We have also checked custom RBAC role creation. If you have learned something new, please feel free to subscribe. If you have any questions while trying what I have shown, please feel free to comment in and I'll try to help you guys. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Have a great day. Bye bye.